group of us met here about 2 weeks ago to decide who was going to talk about which project. Nobody picked up Coalfield's Waterview, so I said I would take it. Now, I didn't know much about Coalfield. I pronounced her name Clotilde, but as soon as I agreed to do it, I rushed home and I called a good friend, Sue Kohler, whose husband had worked for years for Coalfield Smith. And when I talked to her, she said, well, Ralph, the first thing you have to do is to learn how to pronounce her name. So I got Coalfield, and I'm trying to keep saying that. I've been saying Clotilde for about 20 years. It's hard to quickly change. And I said, well, do you have any information, some stories about her that we could hear? And she said, well, Carl had worked there, I don't know, for 20 years. Sue and Carl had gone to Cranbrook, so they had a great interest. She's an art historian, and he's an architect. She said one unusual thing was that when Coalfield's office was fairly small, and Carl had only been working there a short while. Do I have to talk into this?
Yes. Well, no. Better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
She said one interesting thing was, when the office was small, she suddenly said she would take the whole office to Spain for a vacation and pay for it. Now, I've been in several offices. I've never heard of a paid vacation in Spain, especially man and wife. They both went. And I said, well, what did you do in Spain? Well, she said, this was a small clique. They all loved her, liked her architecture. They would look at things during the day, and then they'd always meet for dinner at a different restaurant every evening. After they were seated, she always called the bartender, and in her perfect Spanish, she told the bartender how to make the perfect dry martini. I immediately bonded with her. This is a very formal picture of her. She married a man named Bromley Smith. She married a man named, I can hardly see the pictures. She married a man named Bromley Smith, with her name Clotilde. I thought they had wonderful first names, Bromley and Clotilde. I think this must have been a portrait when her husband was a diplomat. You don't see many women in the architectural field wearing pearls and black dresses. I mean, I've got another picture of her later on in her life. She looks much more like she's an architect. But what she hated was being called a woman architect. Now, she was way ahead of her time in this whole feminist movement. She never really agreed with it. After all, she'd broken through the ceiling. Her office was at one time the largest office owned and run by a woman in the United States. I mean, she was a very successful woman. She wouldn't take no for an answer. And I'm going to show you more things about her. Let's see. She was born in 1910, so she'd be, I don't know, 103 or something if she were alive today. She went to the University of Oregon and got an A.B. in Oregon at Eugene. She was there for 4 years. Then she moved on to Washington University in St. Louis. She got a master's in architecture and a planning degree there. Now that gives you a hint on how interested she was in planning. She started with these 2 degrees. I'd like to take you on a walking tour from where Ann and I live. My wife Ann is here tonight, and my other family is also here tonight. They all came to hear me blunder through this talk. I want to take you on a talk. Now, we live in Hickory Cluster. We have 5 rooms, and 3 of them are glass, wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling. We absolutely love it. But when I go to walk down to the village center, something really extraordinary happens. First, I cross a plaza, which is right across the street from me. There are 6 planters with seats around them. And when I was coming here this evening, it was filled with children playing, all colors, all sizes, parents there. It's really a meeting place right in front of our house. Then I go down a staircase, which I think is about 30 feet wide. Now, today, to ask a client, to pay for such a staircase, when a 4-foot wide one probably would have sufficed, we have a 40-foot one. And you go down from different directions, you enter buildings on the landings, but you get down to a magic place. Now, all 3 of these clusters are built around common spaces. A row house, you have common walls, you save on ground, and you put that ground into common spaces. And in Hickory cluster, we have, I think it's 8 acres in the middle, which is owned by all of us who are around it. And you go to Waterview and into Washington Plaza, and they have the lake as an open space. I think it's a 20-acre lake. So it's a fabulous thing. But what is most unusual, as you walk along this path, you never cross a road. You never see a car. I mean, it's absolutely unique. I don't think we really understand how this place started. And thanks to Bob, at that time, they were trying to solve the car problem. Now, the car problem has always been a bane of architects. The houses in Waterview are relatively modest. Some of the lots are only 15 feet wide. Some are 35, some are 40. Some have 2 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. There's even one, I think, with 5 bedrooms. But everybody has always wanted the garage in the house. Am I using this correctly?
Yeah.
They always wanted the garage in the house. All 3 of these architects have the cars detached from the houses. If you have small houses and you have to drive up to each one of them, what you've got are houses in a parking lot. Here, we have something like 250 houses out of these clusters, and there's enough greenery, open space, lakes, to completely change that environment. I think that is still to this day extremely unusual. Now, next. I don't know how many, we've talked about Walter Gropius. I was at Harvard studying at the Graduate School of Design. Bill Compton was there at the same time. This happens to be Gropius's house in Lincoln, Massachusetts. As you know, he had to leave Germany. President Koenig telephoned him and came to Harvard. He built this house in 1937. This is 25 years before Reston. But you can see the brise soleil and things that are taken. If this house was sitting in Reston, I think it would fit right in. Next. Now, we talked briefly about the Architects Collaborative. What I think is amazing, in the background is this graduate school they built. This is a piece of sculpture in front. You can see Walter Gropius in the very middle. You see him peeking out? And then going around is Chip Harkness, one of the Macmillan brothers, the other Macmillan, and Ben Thompson. Now, what Gropius did, he rotated these people through the school. They were in the office, and then they taught and went back to the office. It was a wonderful combination of how to teach architecture. There were others besides this group, but I thought this was extremely unusual. Next. Now, in addition to walking along the path, the other side has the entrances. These are the houses facing the lake. They're kind of pushed down toward the lakeside, so each one has a garden out in front. You kind of step down into the gardens next. Here you can see the walk. On one side to the right are the entrances to the houses, a very high hedge. On the other side, there's an evergreen hedge, which really blocks off the cars. So you're walking, hardly seeing these, we have several hundred houses. We have everybody now has at least 2 cars. I'm on the board of Hickory cluster. Some people have 3 cars. We don't know what to do with this overflow. So we're trying to manage it, and this is one way. Next. The other interesting thing is that if you look at row houses in Boston, row houses in Philadelphia, and really row houses in England, the front plane is flat. They're all in line. They're all the same height. They all have white panel front doors with fan lights, windows on each side. You don't really know where your house is. Is my doorway in the middle of my house? Do I have the 3 windows off to the right? They're all together. I think that's very elegant, but she took another route. She has this wall going in and out, and amazingly, the houses are painted different colors. Now, I went down to the Reston headquarters. I wanted to see all the drawings they had for Coalfield Smith. I found they had a dozen large sheets. They were yellowing with age. But these were different floor plans. Now, I don't know how many. She had, there might be several dozen different varieties of this house. What?
26.
26. You know, they only have 12 sheets down there. I don't know. Next. And the planting now is mature. It really is wonderful. Next. Now, where did Coalfield Smith get this idea for these houses? This happens to be Portofino. Cheryl mentioned it. I don't honestly know if she ever went to it. But you can see these are 4-story houses. They're different colors. They have some red roofs, and they're right on the water. You know, next. Here we have Waterview. We have houses right on the water. You can see the roofs going up and down, the pitched roofs. This is the only project I know where she used pitched roofs. She mainly used flat roofs. Next. Another view. You know, this is almost unbelievable. You're out looking at that huge fountain. You might think you're in Switzerland when you see the fountain. Next. No, this was the competitor. This is each person got their little lot. They built their house on it. There was a tremendous shortage of houses after the Second World War. There is a little bit of green space, but not much. Nobody would give up their property to have common spaces. You know. Now, planning has grown, people have added on. It doesn't look quite this grim today, but this aerial view just gives you the shivers. Next. Now, this shows the problem of trying to put a garage in a small house. It turns into all garages. The garage door has to be 7 feet high and 15 feet wide, and it's on one plane. So, and if it ever goes up, you look inside and it looks like Fig McGee's closet. So we don't quite know what to do with that. But one place where Ann and I lived, slightly larger houses in Bloomfield Hills, but the houses had gray shingled siding, and the garage doors were shingled gray sidings. And there was a rule, you can't keep your car outside, you have to put your car in the garage. But this, so to me, just epitomizes the problem. Next. Now, this is a little hard to read, but the blue at the top is Lake Anne. The green are open spaces. The brown are sidewalks, and the gray is parking. But what you see is all these different sized lots. Some are 15, some are 25, some are 35. They're all different sizes. And she sized all the houses to fit these lots. Now they're row houses, so there's no space in between them. And these Waterview lots at the top are all pushed to the water, so there's all these front gardens, which you kind of saw in an earlier slide. I think this is, and there is a carport or two, but some of the carports even have grass and bushes on the roofs to hide them. It's really amazing on these 3 developments what they've done with the automobile. Next. At the Reston headquarters, I found the original brochure when they were trying to first market Waterview. And this clearly shows the ups and downs. His first house is 2 stories. The next one that goes up higher is 3. They're on sloped lands. So you have this lively in and out on the front elevation and this in and out on the top. One side is garden or lake, and one side is how you get in with your with the front door. Next. This is just quickly a few of those things. This is a slightly wider house. This lot is 24 feet wide. And on the ground floor, which is planned at the left, it says recreation. Today we call that the family room. Now, these houses all have those wonderful 5-foot by 7-foot bathrooms. And they have Pullman kitchens. Now, a friend of mine, who I think all of you know, Eric Henderson, not so many, before Clothilde died, she wanted to come back and look at the houses. And he agreed that she could see his house. He said it was a very hot, wet day. He opened the front door. Here was this limp-looking woman, and she had a driver with him. He invited her in. They quickly looked at the house. Then they drank lemonade on the terrace. And she had the nerve to ask him, did he like the house? You hardly ever asked your client years later, did they like the house? He said they loved the big windows. They liked the shape. They had 2 problems. One is the shower was too small, but he had moved part of the closet away, and now he had a very large shower. And he and his wife loved to cook, so they had to keep putting up with the Pullman kitchen. But it was a little larger than those tiniest ones. Next. These are some of the narrow houses. These are, I think, 15 feet wide. Next. This is, Colson cluster. This is another project she did here in Reston, and you can see the same kind of windows, the same kind of treatment, but these roofs are flat. This Sue I got a hold of, she has researched where the material for Coalfield Smith could be found, and I'm going to go there sometime soon. And at the Georgetown Library, there's a Peabody room, and they have lots of newspaper articles and photographs. I want to find out more about her. When we first started this, Cheryl called her the mystery woman. I think we've now brought her out of the shadows, but we've got to get a spotlight on her. Next. Now, what else has she done? This is a wonderful house, Bethesda, and if it were built today, you would think it was absolutely current. Now, this was being done about the same time as Hickory Cluster. Next. These are other views of it. Lots of glass, outdoor spaces to live in. Next. She even has a plunge. This is a tub you plunge into, and it's got an entire wall of glass and a partial glass ceiling. So she was really very current back in the 60s. Next. This is one of my favorites. It's so symmetrical, but yet it's got that top skylight off center. Kind of a quirk. Next. This is the interior of what was called the upside down house. You entered this house on the top floor, which is the bedroom level, and you walk down to the garden level. Next. This is the garden level of that house. Now, this house was sold by Sotheby's recently for $1.19 million. It's a modest house. I think we forget how valuable these houses are getting to be. If you own a Queen Anne dresser and a hand pull fell off, you wouldn't go to Home Depot to get a new one. You'd either find one to match or you'd change them all. Well, we have that same problem with these houses. You can't have something go wrong and you go to Home Depot and find a replacement. When I first moved into Hickory Cluster, I couldn't find anyone to do the screens. I called several screen companies, and then we come out to, Mr. Youngren, your screen is 8 feet by 7 feet. We don't do screens like that. One day I came home and there was a truck driving through, and they had screens in the back of the truck. I ran alongside, got the phone number, and called them. I finally got new screens for our house. But you have to be patient to keep these houses going. Next. This is that upside-down house. You enter at this top level, which is bedrooms, and you're now up in the treetops. It really is a charming house. Next. These are other views of that house. Next. Now, this is Khalid Smith as an architect working in an office. She did a lot of work on Southwest Washington. She was instrumental in that. She did quite a few buildings. Here she's looking at a model of it. Next. This was called Capitol Square. She had row houses, high houses, but this center was all done by Dan Kiley. Now, I worked with Dan Kiley on the Air Force Academy, I think for 6 or 8 years. As soon as SOM got a job, I called Dan Kiley. We met first. He had wonderful ideas on what to do. And this is a reflecting pool in that complex. Unfortunately, not too long ago, they put 2 more buildings in this. Now we have to watch out as these buildings get older and the property gets more and more valuable, they can quite easily be destroyed. So this, in my mind, is now ruined. It was its best landscape ever, and it's now gone. Next. These are other buildings she has done. Next. They're quite amazing buildings. There's next. Well, before I talk about it, there's one corner at Connecticut and L. It's called Coalfield's Corner. She's done 3 of the large buildings, and she's done the subway stop. The 4th building was an SOM building. So we call that Coalfield's Corner. Now, this is the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. It's really where you buy gold things. It's a wonderful bridge. Next. But Khalid Smith had her own Ponte Vecchio. This is on the Potomac Canal. It's not a bridge for people to walk across. It's for restaurants and all kinds of things. It's in a book called Unbuilt Washington. I think this is an extraordinary thing. And when I talked to Sue Colder, his friend, she said, well, Carl had been talking for weeks about this strange bridge he was working on called, they called it the Ponte Vecchio. But it's not exactly like the one in Florence. Next. This is the Royal Crescent in Bath. I mean, these are wonderful Victorian buildings with 12-foot ceilings. But next, we have our own crescent here in Reston. I think it's fantastic. Next. Now, we're coming to our 50th anniversary. We started with these big name architects. We've gone through 50 years, but my wife was a volunteer on a house tour, and in the little catalog, it mentioned Helmut Jahn at the bottom. We immediately got in contact, and Helmut Jahn, where the new station is doing 3 very large buildings. This is one of them. Now, this construction is just starting up. You can't see any of this. He also studied at IIT. He just had a retrospective in Nuremberg, an enormous one, which has now moved on to Munich. And we want to have some of his work, when this gets a little further along, maybe early next year, have some of the drawings for this project and some photographs of his existing work. I think it'd be very exciting to have that happening on our 50th anniversary. We started with well-known architects. 50 years later, we still have well-known architects. Thank you very much.